I'm talking about the global revival of religion and specifically of Christianity. This is all drawn from the opening chapter of my book, What's So Great About Christianity. Maybe kind of cool if you get a copy of the book in paperback. You can follow along as I'm talking about all this. Now, as I mentioned, there's a kind of sweeping revival of Hinduism in India, Islam in North Africa, also obviously in the traditional Islamic world, but also in Asia, countries like Indonesia, and of course the revival of Islam in Turkey. Some people think this is some sort of a fundamentalist revival. And we keep hearing about Islamic fundamentalism, Hindu fundamentalism. In my view, this is a little dumb because fundamentalism is, in fact, a concept internal to Protestant Christianity. There was a so-called fundamentalist movement about 100 years ago occurring in the United States. And this was a kind of let's go back to the basics movement inside of Protestantism. And it was a rebellion against so-called liberal Christianity, the infusion of liberalism into the Protestant churches. So if we're not talking about a revival of fundamentalism, what is it? Well, it's a revival of traditional religion. It's the revival of Islam the way Islam's been since the 7th century. It's a revival of Hinduism the way Hinduism is understood through the Hindu classics like the Bhagavad Gita. It's a revival of Christianity the way Christianity has been through the centuries. Now, traditional Christianity is not the only type of Christianity. There's also, let's call it progressive or liberal Christianity. And it's being pushed very hard today, especially onto young people, that as a way of kind of trying to keep Christianity relevant. And the problem with liberal Christianity is simply this, that liberal Christianity embraces a whole series of liberal causes, equal rights for women, introducing kind of gays into the church, making the churches more democratic, and so on. But the problem is this, it was kind of twofold. As a Christian, you're supposed to be the church's ambassador to the world. You're supposed to take Christian ideas and push them out there into the world. It seems like what the liberal Christians are doing is they are sort of not the church's missionaries to the world, but the world's missionaries to the church. They take secular values, gay marriage and feminism, and they start agitating within the church. It's almost as if the church is the problem. We got to fix the church. The church needs to change in line with the world and not the other way around. Probably the most devastating criticism of liberal Christianity is that it's a failure on its own terms. It's supposed to be making Christianity more relevant and therefore more popular. Okay, well, let's look at the liberal churches. Which are they? The United Methodist Church, the Presbyterian Church, the United Church of Christ. All of these churches are losing members in droves. You walk into a United Church of Christ, it's largely empty. By contrast, if you go to the conservative churches, Baptist churches, Assemblies of God churches, what do you see? The churches are full of people. They are what I'm getting at is that the traditional Christian message is resonating far more with people than the so-called watered down, diluted, progressive message where people go, well, listen, I guess I can sit in church and listen to this guy drone on about feminism, but I could just as easily go join some feminist organization. I'm listening to all this sort of talk about gays and tolerance. Well, I could go, march in the gay rights parade myself and be even more relevant. So in a sense, the question becomes, why join a liberal church when those messages are actually pervasive in the culture and there are other organizations that reflect those values? Now, I think what's encouraging to me is that for many years, we have been hearing that as the world sort of becomes, along with technology and as time passes, the world will automatically become more secular. People sort of assumed, and scholars assumed, that as people became more educated, they would stop going to church, and cultures that were once traditional, as they began to advance toward modernity, would become less traditional and would kind of throw away the baggage of their ancient, if you will, religious convictions. But this does not appear to be happening. In fact, if you look at the most rapidly modernizing societies around the world, they're becoming actually more religious. There's a huge revival of Hinduism going on in India, so much so that some Muslims and Christians are a little threatened by it. Wow, the Hindus who are normally these kind of go along, get along guys, don't seem to be too concerned about their Hinduism at all, suddenly are more conscious about it. So as India becomes more technological, more modern, is rapidly growing economically, religion is reviving. And by the way, there is also a strong Christian movement now, largely underground in China. And over 100 million Christians in China. Think about that. That's still a minority, of course, of the Chinese population. But there's a kind of a weird relationship between suppression and what happens to a group of people. They could actually shut down under suppression, as happened with, for example, politically with Tiananmen Square, or they could respond the other way. Suppression actually makes people more fervent, more strong in their convictions. The underground churches begin to grow. That appears to be happening in China. So the point I want to make is that if you take a global sort of survey, you see that religion in general and Christianity in particular are doing pretty well. Now, of course, none of this by itself proves that Christianity is true or religion is true. It's just a sociological observation about the fact that as societies become more economically developed and more modern, far from outgrowing or believing that they need to move away from faith and from religion, many people seem to believe that religion and faith are more relevant than ever.